Welcome back to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. I'm Connor Williams, joined by Alan Feehely, and this is the sort of reaction to Dele Alli, who looks to be heading to Besiktas. Last time I checked, they're offering a loan with an obligation to buy, I think, unless it changed in the last hour before I came on and recorded. But there were also rumours they would just offer the 8 million. Spurs will apparently get a cut of it, and it's down to Dele Alli, the player. Frank Lampard, from what I've read, is sort of said he's not that fussed. The club have said it's down to Dele Alli. Give me your feelings on this one. This is an odd one.
Yeah, disappointments. I think when he signed for Everton, like I said in the last podcast I did with you, Connor, like I'm optimistic person, so I was like, okay, he's obviously had a rough time at Spurs over the last few years, but there is a player there. And maybe the new environment, getting away from London, working with Frank Lampard, who he obviously respects and gets on with, in a new kind of, team and kind of community environments, maybe he could, rediscover that spark. And just hasn't happened, obviously. I mean, aside from a few brief flourishes, obviously most notably against Crystal Palace when he came on and was important in how we turned that game around. I think that his career at Everton has been really disappointing. Really nondescript, not leaving any strong feelings, obviously taking so long to start the game and then, just not contributing at all really on the pitch. So I think it's a sad one. I mean, obviously they don't want to pay the fee that will be triggered if he plays X number of games for Everton, which is approaching relatively soon, I think. So that's probably the reason behind it in terms of why they're open to it. Getting his wages off the books too might help in terms of bringing in another forward or whatever. So yeah, I think it's sadness, but I'm not surprised by it really. I don't think it'd be a huge loss. I don't think he's been a successful signing. And I think, going to Turkey for a player like him, even though he's only 26 years old, is kind of on brand, So I just don't think he has what it takes to cut it in the elite of European football anymore. So, yeah, I think it's more of a riding feeling of sadness, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, it's disappointment and sadness. And not just from an Everton point of view. From an Everton point of view, like you said, I'm a bit moot on it because I can't name other than Blackpool the game where he played the full 90. And other than the Crystal Palace game, I'm struggling to remember a game that I thought, oh, he's had a real effect on. Obviously, that Crystal Palace one ended up being one of the more important, and fans will rightly mention that. And some will argue maybe that was him paying, his time at Everton in dividends because he helped keep us up. But it's more of a disappointment just, I feel like, for him, the person, the player, 20 years old, sort of, to quote Michael Richards, burst on the scene at Tottenham, had a really good year. It's hard to imagine that at one point it was him, Kane and Son, and they were, lethal form. And now he looks like he might be on his way to Turkey, like you said, at like 26. And if you judged him off the last 2 years, nobody would be shocked. It's quite on brand. But when you think of him when he was a 20-year-old lad, if you said to somebody back then, he'll be in Turkey in 5 years, people would laugh your head off, wouldn't they?
Yeah, totally. I think even a lot of commentators and journalists, I've been disappointed about how this worked out because a lot of people like him as a player because he's that kind of throwback. Like I remember at his peak in, I think it was maybe 2016, 2017 under Pochettino when Spurs were really in full flight. He was just so good, you know what I mean? He was playing was so aggressive and he's so strong and he's a big tall guy, and he was kind of breaking from midfield into the box and playing with such kind of audacity and, zero fear whatsoever. So it was very exciting to see. And it's something you don't see too often because he was basically like a street footballer playing in the most elite environments in European football. So for him to have his career peter out the way it did at Spurs, obviously we were mentioning off camera the All or Nothing documentary when Jose Mourinho quite clearly kind of, chewed him out in the manager's office after a training session. It's sad. And when he came to Everton, I think a lot of people thought that he would do well. He would rediscover his career there. We get the benefit of it. The way the deal was structured, it was low risk from our end because it was all based on, future payments. So I was hopeful it would work out, but it hasn't. And it's quite remarkable, really. I can't remember a player who broke onto the scene, as you said, at 20, was so good and then just fell off the cliff for no reason. There was no drink or drugs. There was no, scandals. There was no injuries, nothing like that. So it really is a bizarre situation. It seems to be from the outside just a case of kind of losing hunger and losing focus that's required operating at the top of European football.
Yeah, which is when we signed him, I came on a channel and said I wasn't that thrilled because of the Tottenham documentary. I trusted Mourinho's sort of summary of him, and then we mentioned off camera the bit where Mourinho says that one day he was 20, the next he's 50. Sort of time flies. Dele Alli's got to do what he wants to do now. It's sort of in hindsight now looks like those words weren't really heeded. Realistically, though, did you think he ever suited? Now we know what Frank Lampard's formation was. Do you think he ever suited us? Just because I always had him down as a number 10, and you don't see many number 10 formations now. I think West Ham and I think Brentford did it for a bit last season, are the two that are top of my head spring to mind. But they always say, the number 10 role is dying out in football. It'll probably come back in 10 years, but you always hear that. Do you think he ever fitted this, though? Because I wouldn't have him down as a single centre mid, and I don't think Lampard was ever having the intention of playing a 4-2-3-1.
I think the hope was that he'd be kind of that breaking, like in Spain, it's like an interior, like the midfielder kind of, who isn't in the middle of a midfield three, is kind of, like a number 8, but maybe a bit more advanced. And like sometimes you can have like an asymmetrical 4-3-3, where you could have somebody like, I don't know, for example, say in this formation, hopefully if we sign Idrissa Gueye, for instance, we could have, Ghana sitting in midfield, Onana on the left, and Dele Alli on the right, where you've like Dele Alli kind of, breaking forward a bit more, having a bit more creative freedom. And then you have Onana doing the same, but with more defensive responsibility. Because I think that the idea was to redevelop Dele as a number 8, as a midfielder who could break from midfield and run from deep, as opposed to playing as number 10 or as a second striker. And I think that, that was Frank's intention when he came into the club in January. He wanted to play that kind of, possession-based football, 4-3-3, that kind of thing. Obviously, it didn't work out for various reasons. And he went to a 3 at the back, which automatically asks more from your central midfielders because you normally only have 2 of them. And then you're looking at what you pay him on the wing. There's no position for him behind the striker. So it didn't work out. You're right. Like, I think, it was a signing that worked out in terms of intentions. I mean, I think that if they were playing that 4-3-3 shape with, front foot attacking football, possession-based football, you could see a place for him. But as soon as things started to go wrong and we started going to a back 3 and a back 5 and, putting more responsibility on the midfielders, it became more and more difficult for him to get into the team and find a groove and get his confidence back. And, I don't see that changing anytime soon. So unfortunately, it just doesn't seem to be a case where he can properly, play a role unless he's playing as like a false 9 or something, which I don't think suits him either. So yeah, it's just a case of, a signing not fitting our system like many others have over the years.
Yeah, I was going to say, this isn't the first time we've seen Everton sign a player that I think people were excited about. That just ends up, just for whatever reason, not fitting the system. Like you said, potentially losing hunger, whichever way, it happens quite frequently at this club. So fans should be a little bit more used to it than others. I will give the club, the credit where it's due. The transfer deal at the time seemed a little bit too good to be true. Obviously, in hindsight, you could now go, well, you can see why they wanted shot of him. But the idea that potentially we could get some money off him as well now, I've seen people praising, and I've got to admit that it seems to be a clever business move by us, all in all, to sell him, especially if the obligation to buy is the 8 million rumoured and Spurs take the 25% cut. I think that still leaves us coming out of this quite well.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like I said earlier, it was a low risk deal in the way it was structured. It was all based on future payments in terms of, performance based metrics. So it would only ever cost, I think, what was it, 40 million was the total fee that was being bandied about if he was a superb success. Yeah, obviously hasn't been and probably won't be, but like the way we structured it, thankfully, means that we're protected, and we have been protected. If we sell him for 8 million euros or whatever it is, like it works out well because it's a good thing to bring in a player and make a profit on it, So yeah, I think it was smart for sure. I think the Cody deal is similar. It's a low risk option. The Onana deal is definitely less risk averse, spending 40 million euro for a player who I think made 11 starts for Rennes last season. Or Lille, sorry, last season. Is it Rennes or Lille he's on? Was it Rennes? I think it was Rennes. Lille, sorry.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of commentators in French football have said it's a lot of money for him for a player of his experience. I mean, I'm still hopeful it's going to work out, of course, but it's definitely not as risk averse as Dele or Cody's deals were. But yeah, I guess that's what you have to do when you're paying for the player who's at the beginning of his career and being coveted by the European elite, as opposed to someone who's at the end of his career. And even though Dele is only 26 years of age, I'm also 26 years of age. I'm not at the end of my career, but like he seems to be checking out basically. So I don't know. It's a sad thing, but at least the club did protect themselves.
Yeah, which is ultimately what fans will prioritise more than anything is that the club have looked after themselves. Just quickly before we end, do you think this could go well for Do you think this move's good for Dele Alli? I've seen Jamie Redknapp say it's sort of a now or never for him. Do you think this? Not that he'll get. I don't think he'll ever get back in the top elite. But do you think this could be a good move for him for where he is right now?
I think the now or never kind of came in Everton, really. I think, if you want to reboot your career, you go to a more kind of not respected footballing nation, but somewhere like the Bundesliga or like La Liga or Italy or France. You don't go to, in my opinion, Turkey. Like Turkey is the place where retiring footballers go to make one last payday. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think if he's going to a more literate football nation, or even Portugal, like one of those kind of up and coming, cleverly scouted and organized footballing nations would make more sense from that perspective. But the fact that he's going to Turkey just doesn't feel like a progressive move for me at all, to be honest with you.
No, I agree. I think he's got before, because he's only 26 as well. I think he's still got the MLS on his checklist, a bit like Kieran Gibbs has before he stops. So I think I wouldn't be shocked if in a year's time, 2 years' time, we hear about him with the MLS, probably into
Yeah.
Miami and Phil Neville. So watch that one. But that is all we've got time for on the Dele Alli transfer. Once again, thank you for coming on and joining me, mate. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
No worries, Connor. Thanks for having me on. A pleasure as always.
Don't forget, guys, you can like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. You can check out Alan. His link to his Twitter will be in the description down below, so make sure you go check him out and follow him. And give us your thoughts in the comment section down below on Dele Alli and his time at Everton, if you can. And I'll see you guys very soon.